Our YouTube server back, of course, talk about some Crisis Core Reunion, and today we got a brand new trailer for the game and also a release date. Now, there's not a whole lot to break down from the trailer necessarily. For one, it's a 15-year-old game as of like actually today, so not really a whole lot to say there in that regard. But we did get like an Odin reveal. We got to see what Odin looks like. We got to hear Cisne talk. We got to hear Genesis talk. Speaking of which, we did get some voice actor reveals because they did put out a new blog for the game alongside this new trailer. And the obvious ones are obvious, like Cody Christian still voicing Cloud. You saw Vic Chow voicing Song. But then we did get the newer reveals like Cisne's voiced by Kaylee Mills. Then we also got the voice actor for Lazard, who we heard talk in the first like reveal trailer for Crisis Core Reunion, but I don't know if they announced publicly who the voice actor was, but now we know it's Francis Osley. Jason Marnoka as Hollander, and then oddly enough, this one kind of like surprised me, but they recast, so to speak, Yuffie. And to be fair, I kind of understand it because Yuffie's pretty young in Crisis Core. I think she's like 9 years old, and the voice actor they are using for Crisis Core is also a little girl. But Susie Young's also been doing voice acting for like only a couple years now, but she's been in a lot of shit. I feel like she could have done a little girl voice. Plus, it's like such a brief scene that it's kind of weird to even recast it. Ultimately, it doesn't even matter. It's not even a big deal. It's just when I was scrolling down the voice acting list, when I got to Yuffie, I expected to see Susie Young's name. When I seen a different name, I was like, what the hell's happening here? That was kind of strange. Anyways, as for the release date, it is in fact going to be December 13th, which if you guys remember, we did a video a little while back about a kind of leaked release date. There's like a French website, I believe it was, that had the game listed for December 13th. By the time I got around to making the video, they changed the date to December 31st. It's kind of like a placeholder date. And I even said in that video, I thought that was kind of weird because the actual placeholder date for Crisis Core Reunion should have been March 31st of next year, 2023, because that's technically the end of the winter season. The game is supposed to come out this winter, so anytime between December and obviously March of next year. So I found that kind of strange. Like, if they're going to do a placeholder date, they shouldn't have kept it in December. So that kind of more confirmed that the game was going to release in December. And there's also a Square Enix like blog post about Crisis Core, and I don't remember which one it was, and they might have changed it by now because I can't track it down for the video. But where they talked about Crisis Core coming out this year, which had to be a mistake, because why would they specify it's coming this year? Because that just also means it was coming in December. So all signs have been pointing towards this game dropping this year, and it turned out to be true. And that, my dudes, is why we cover this shit. That's why we cover something as simple as Square Enix saying the game's dropping this year, or why we cover some random website selling the game on a weird date. Because sometimes this shit's legit. And of course, when we talk about this shit, there's always like pessimists, because the people that were saying like, nah, there's no way Crisis Core dropping this year. It's dropping next year, March next year, probably at the end of the winter season. It's like, man, is there any positivity in this community? Is it just me? Why is everybody so negative? Also, something we got today is a piece of key art for Crisis Core Reunion that is also the cover art for the game. It's actually different than what I was expecting. I thought they would just do like a modern version of the original Crisis Core cover, but instead they did this, which is honestly, in a lot of ways, better because it's Cloud, Sephiroth, and Zack. But it's also, in a lot of ways, kind of sad because it's clearly the cliff overlooking Midgar. This is where Zack's supposed to die at. You see the rain. Obviously, it's raining during his death and shit like that. So it's kind of like a bittersweet piece of art. But either way, it's gorgeous. That being said, however, I do got to get a little bit nitpicky here. And I've also already seen other people talk about this on Twitter. But for some reason, they gave Cloud a soldier outfit, which is a little bit weird just because Cloud doesn't really have that until like the end of the game. More specifically, it's like the last hour and a half or so of the game that Cloud actually gets that soldier outfit. Throughout the rest of the game prior to that, he's wearing like the regular Shinra like soldier, like infantryman outfit, or whatever the case, the one with the scarf that you see in the trailer. Like that's the Cloud from Crisis Core for the most part, right? Which is why it's kind of weird they chose to use this version of Cloud for the cover. Obviously, it's the more iconic version of Cloud, but it's not really true to the character of Cloud in this game up until like the end of the game, really. And normally that'd be kind of the end of the video, but there is actually one detail that we got to talk about based on this key art that's kind of important. So a little bit ago as well, we did a video talking about the kind of third Midgar when it comes to Remake, right? The Midgar that you're seeing during the Zack scene at the end of Remake that is distinctly designed different to what we see in the original FF7, but also within Remake itself. The things that made it pretty different were the kind of squared off parts of the wall on the outside of Midgar, the outside of the wall of the reactors, but also the tops of the reactors where there's these segmented pieces around the top, but there's like a lot of space between them. There's a lot less pieces, so to speak. Whereas with Remake's design, there's a lot more of these like thinner pieces that go around the top of the reactors, but also there's practically no space between them, right? And a distinct lack of like these squared off parts on the outside of Midgar, on the outside of the reactors. But then it was discovered by Enzivo that the design for the reactors in First Soldier matched that of the Zack Midgar in FF7 Remake, right? Where it's got the squared off walls right there. You can clearly see that they're like a 90-degree angle. But then the tops of the reactors are those fatter pieces with a lot of space between them. Well, it turns out if you actually look in the background of this key art, you can see that the reactors match that of the Zack Midgar in Remake, but also the reactors in First Soldier. And to be fair, it's not the best quality picture, but you can see like the shadow between the segmented pieces at the top. And also, they're not done building these reactors. You can't really see like the squared off parts of the wall that you would see with the Zack Midgar reactor or the First Soldier reactor. But they're also clearly under construction. There's a lot of construction happening behind these three characters. Also, if you look back at this image of this reactor, they're not even like really done making the reactor itself, because if you look at the top left, there's like a weird cutoff where it's not like symmetrical with like the top right side of the reactor. So they're clearly still building that reactor specifically, so it's not even done. So they could get around to, after this construction would be done, having that bulky squared off part on the outside of the wall. And then right here we have a quick side-by-side of the technically 4 different reactors. I put an arrow pointing towards the one in the Zack Midgar one, just because the more you zoom in on the image, the shittier quality it gets. But out of these 4, again, the remake reactors are the outliers. They're the ones that seem super, super different. And look, when we talk about stuff like this, there's always the doubters out there, right? The people that we talked about earlier in the video, the pessimists or whatever. The people that think it means nothing at all, or they chalk every little thing up to a dev error or whatever the case. But clearly, that's not the case, right? The fact that we're seeing these differently designed reactors in Crisis Core Reunion means something. Now, that being said, as we discussed with the previous video where we talked about Zack's Midgar, it might not be that it's time travel type shit or even alternate timeline shit. It really could just be an older design of Midgar, which we kind of talked about in that video as well. Given, for one, that First Soldier is set like 30 years in the past and they're using that design of Midgar, and then we're seeing it in other parts of the remake story and FF7 story, things that are also taking place in the past, maybe sometime between like Zack's final stand, which is where you're seeing that older version of Midgar, in the beginning of FF7 / the beginning of Remake, maybe they redesigned the reactors, but that's still a bit of a stretch because it's not that long. When it comes to the original FF7 story, at least, Zack dies in like late September, and the story picks up in the beginning of FF7 in December of the same year 7, right? So it's only been like a few months since Zack died. So if Remake's continuity is the same, which I don't know if we know the exact time frame on that shit, then within the span of a few months, they completely redesigned all the reactors, which is maybe a possibility, but again, a bit of a stretch. Now, initially going into this video and this discussion, I was going to talk about the reactors that we actually see in Crisis Core, because I noticed that on the cover art for the PSP game, you can actually see a reactor in the background, but it's kind of hard to see. It's a little covered up by light. It's obviously an old image, etc., etc. But as to be expected, you can get a better look at Midgar if you look at the full key art, and to the right of Zack in this image is a better look at a reactor, and it turns out that reactor actually closely matches the remake reactors, as opposed to matching the actual Crisis Core Reunion reactors, the First Soldier reactor, or even Zack's Midgar in 7 Remake. So that makes it even more confusing. So now it really has me wondering if there is or isn't a purpose to this, because initially going into the video, I was just going to kind of brush it off as maybe an older design in-universe, not from a dev perspective. But the thing is, we've seen this consistent design from FF7 Original 1997 to Crisis Core 2007 to Remake in 2020. The tops of the reactors look exactly the same, right? But then also within Remake, you're seeing the differently designed Midgar and Zack scene. First Soldier has this kind of weird design as well that matches it. And then now you're seeing it with Crisis Core Reunion, where Crisis Core Reunion is not matching up with the original Crisis Core. The point of all this, dudes, is that here towards the end of the video, I don't know what the fuck to think anymore. Because they've had this consistent design for the tops of the reactors since the original game, 25 years ago. And then its prequel had these similar designs to the reactors. And then the remake to that game in 2020, 23 years later, had a similar design as well to the reactors. But also within that same game, we're seeing differently designed reactors that we've never seen before. Because I thought initially the Crisis Core had the kind of bulky, spaced out design, but it doesn't. It actually matches Remake. So now, I don't know what the hell to think. Because why does Crisis Core Reunion have different reactors? Why does First Soldier have different reactors? Why does Zack's Midgar in that scene in Remake have different reactors? I don't know. But that's where we're going to start to wrap up the video, my dudes. So here's what I know. What I had know for sure is that this is not some error on the devs, because we've now seen these bulkier designed reactors in 3 separate games. We've seen it in Remake, we've now seen it in First Soldier, and now we're seeing it in Crisis Core Reunion. But it's not linking up with other designs that we've seen throughout the compilation. So what the hell does that mean? I don't know. Is it like an older design in-universe, and by the time the FF7 story starts, they've remodeled all those? Maybe, that's a possibility. I'm not writing that off. That could be all it is, and it means nothing at all. It's just, this is older Midgar. Or it could kind of allude to the alternate timeline shit, or the altered timeline stuff, which would then mean that Crisis Core Reunion is in fact happening in at least the altered timeline, so maybe there is going to be new stuff. I don't know, man. It's exciting. Regardless of whether or not it means something or nothing at all, it's still exciting and fun to think about. We only got a few months, man. December 13th, and we have this game in our hands. I can't wait to play it. Aside from the possibility of new shit or whatever the case, put that stuff aside. I'm just excited to play through Crisis Core again, because it's been a long time. But my dudes, that's going to be the video. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, give a thumbs up, subscribe. If you guys are new ones today, more Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion content. Turn on my notifications. Follow me on Twitter, @DavidYT, at my Discord. Links to social networks are in the description. In the outro. Later, guys.
Cloud. Used to care what people thought, but now I care more, and nobody out here's got it figured out. So therefore, I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect, we spend it with no shame, we blow that. Like Coltrane, we in here, like Logain or leave it, like Cobain.